Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to cover another episode from season 8. This is episode 9, The Violated. This episode was written by Robert Pirosh and directed by Walter Alsman. As is typical, we have more than one storyline happening in the episode. One piece of it is that Olivia has been having nightmares about John Boy's plane crash and where is he, and that he's still missing in action. So she and John go to see Mrs. Denman at the Red Cross. While they're there, she doesn't have any information yet about John Boy, but she does ask if they could help out because there is a young man, a GI, who is about to be shipped overseas, Frank Thatcher, and he is concerned because his wife Darcy stopped writing back to him about a month ago. So he's worried that maybe she's sick, what's going on, and could Olivia perhaps please go and find out, check in on his wife, find out what's going on. So Olivia says she will, that she can go with Mary Ellen because Mary Ellen makes rounds up into those backwoods. So she'll just tag along there and go with her. When Olivia and Mary Ellen go by Darcy Thatcher's cabin, they find her brandishing a shotgun and seeming like something is clearly has her spooked, that runs in the house. They finally convince her to let them in and talk with her. And they find out that she has been attacked, basically raped by a man. She won't say who it is. And she has not reported it because she doesn't think anyone will believe her side of the story, that they will just believe him and feel that she somehow teased him, led him on. She asked for it, that will be his story. And she doesn't want to go through that humiliation. She doesn't want her husband to know because she thinks that he will perhaps go and try and kill the young man, the man who attacked her. And she doesn't want him to be arrested for that. And she feels like she's been ruined for her husband. So quite a few things going on in this storyline. What I thought was particularly interesting was, the Waltons had a history of taking on very difficult subjects and controversial subjects, and this is certainly high on that list and pretty much lays out what so many women have experienced if they have been attacked and have chosen to try to prosecute. That he said, she said story continues to be difficult to prove. What's the fact, because it can often come down to that. And when Olivia goes to the sheriff, he basically says that they will want to know all about whoever the young woman is, her background, that perhaps she did ask for it, and basically that her moral character will be put on trial. And Olivia thinks that this is just ridiculous, why should the woman be the one who is suddenly on trial? It's certainly a question that there is a lot of history around, and it's an unfortunate situation that we still deal with in today's society. When Olivia goes to the sheriff's office, it is not Ep Bridges who is there. Perhaps John Crawford was not available for the episode, but I also think because this deputy sheriff seemed disinclined to believe Darcy's side of the story, that what we knew of Ep Bridges, he was someone that to me would have gone and investigated and really been more likely to trust Darcy's side of the story. So I think it made sense to have a different character, a different deputy there. I think it would have been hard to believe Ep would have so dismissed Darcy's claim and sided with Slater. Son Slater does startle Olivia when she's sweeping out the smokehouse and sort of threatens her, says he's heard that she's been talking about him and making accusations. She really stands up to him. It's one of the toughest that we see Olivia, and she really just drives him off.
You turn around and start walking, and don't you ever come back here again. You think you're a big man, but you and I both know what you are.
But then when he leaves, there's this moment where you clearly see how upsetting this exchange was for her, and she runs into the house. And so it took a toll on her and was clearly made her uncomfortable to have this confrontation, and perhaps she herself felt somewhat threatened by it. Olivia has called Mrs. Denman and asked for an emergency furlough for Frank to come home and see Darcy before he is shipped out. Darcy didn't want Frank to know, but Olivia feels like he would want to know, and that if something happened to Frank, Darcy would want to know. So she's not quite willing to honor that request of Darcy's. Frank does get a leave. He comes back. John has come home meanwhile. He was off working, and he's ready to go after Slater for threatening Olivia. And she says, no, wait until tomorrow, and so the next day, Olivia takes Frank to Darcy's. And of course, when he finds out who it was, he grabs a shotgun. Frank is ready to go after Slater. John arrives and convinces him that it's not worth throwing away his life. And John has actually gone in that morning to confront Slater and basically told him he better leave the mountain, and really gets in his face, shoves him in the creek. And Slater realizes that it's in his best interest to leave the mountain. And he's been thinking about going somewhere else. So, it's nice to see John in that light too, being so protective. Frank and Darcy do have an opportunity to reconcile, which is nice, and that he is going to be there to support his wife through this difficult thing, and that it's out in the open and they will find a way past it. The subplot involves Ike and Corbeth. Corbeth has received a phone call that her favorite uncle, her mother's brother, has died, and as she's telling Ike about him and how that he had money and whatnot, and all of a sudden Ike starts thinking, oh, you were his favorite niece. Ike's pretty sure that Corbeth is perhaps his only living relative that he felt strongly about, and that she just might inherit money. At first, she's like appalled by the idea that Ike would even think about money. But then the idea gets in her head that perhaps there could be an inheritance, and what would she do with it? When Ike and Corbeth talk about what they could do with that money, Ike has all kinds of ideas about expanding the store and upgrading things, and Corbeth is appalled because she's like, no, that is not what I want to do. It's my inheritance, and I want to enhance the arts and live a better, more artistic, culturally filled life. And so they're on opposite sides of this question.
The inheritance is mine to do with as I see fit.
At one point, Ike goes and, because John's out of town and he can't get John's advice, he goes and gets Jason, because Jason knows about the situation and asks his advice. And Jason's like, I am horrible about advice for women, so I'm like the wrong person. But he kind of says, give her what she wants, And Ike ultimately figures out how to make this work. So he's sitting outside Godsy's hall the next morning, and Corbeth comes by, and Ike's talking about how, he's been looking at maybe they get a summer place, and maybe Elizabeth takes over running the store. And all of a sudden, Corbeth's starting to get the idea that her place of really being the proprietress of Godsy's store, that Elizabeth couldn't possibly take on that role properly. And so she begins to rethink her position. Corbeth has indeed received a check for $18,000, which was a lot of money at that point. Still a lot of money. And she decides what she really wants to do in light of it being pointed out that John Boy is missing in action. And looking at that board of young men who are serving and whatnot, she feels that what she wants to do with that money right now is invest it in war bonds and help support what is going on. And then later on, perhaps they'll figure out something else to do with that money once the bonds mature. So a happy ending on that story, certainly. The episode ends with Mrs. Denman arriving at the Walton house and telling basically John, Olivia, and Mary Ellen, who are talking about the situation that happened with Darcy. She comes in to tell them that they've gotten word that John Boy has been found. He was at a hospital overseas, and he's now being transported to a hospital in Washington, D.C., that they will be able to see him But when Olivia asks, how bad is it? She says it's very serious. And interesting in this episode, because at the end it says that the conclusion of the episode will be seen the following week.
The conclusion of this episode will be seen next on The Waltons.
And that's basically all the end narration there is. So this was sort of a storyline in 2 episodes, but they were 2 separate scripts, and we shot them as 2 separate scripts with different writers and directors. And the next continuation of the story ends up being The Waiting, when we find out that John Boy's in a coma, and we are introduced to Robert Whiteman as he takes over the role of John Boy. Some wonderful guest stars in this episode. I'm not going to mention Leslie and Joe Connelly and Ronnie Claire and the Reed twins as John Curtis, because we're just so used to seeing them that they, at this point in this season, are really sort of part of the family and part of the cast. Rose was mentioned, Peggy Ray, but she was not seen in this episode, but we get the sense that she's around. We just didn't see her. As for guest stars, Jordan Clark played Son Slater, and he went on to do 489 episodes of The Guiding Light soap opera and won 3 daytime Emmys. Diana Douglas played Mrs. Denman in 3 episodes in season 8, and she was previously or was currently married to Kirk Douglas and was the mother of Michael Douglas. She began her career at 20 as a Powers Agency model and was on the cover of Life magazine May 3rd, 1943. She was in all kinds of work in film and television, including the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. She was Professor Tyler in the Paper Chase series. She was in Days of Our Lives, General Hospital, did an episode of Streets of San Francisco, which of course her son Michael Douglas starred in. And she did 835 episodes of the serial, the soap opera Love Is May Splendor Thing from 1970 and 1973. So quite an accomplished actress herself. John Stedman played Joe Bascom. He was a writer and producer for the Armed Forces Radio Network for several decades after World War II. And he also did 2 episodes of Little House on the Prairie. And then the character of Mr. Bascom was seen in the episode The Nurse, but it was played by a different actor. And then Macon McCalman was the deputy in this episode. He did 2 episodes, this one, The Violated, and was also in The Prodigals, also as this same deputy. In tons of other work that he did, he also was in the movie Smokey and the Bandit, Deliverance, Fried Green Tomatoes, and did tons of TV. And then Kelly Ward was Frank Thatcher. And Kelly played Putsy in the Grease movie with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, and he was in The Big Red One, and then went on to become a very successful voice actor, director, and even taught musical theater at USC. Darcy Thatcher was played by the beautiful Antoinette Stella, who went on to writing and producing for shows including Star Trek Enterprise, Melrose Place, and Law & Order Criminal Intent. Thank you for joining me for this segment about the episode The Violated from Season 8. I'll be back with more behind the scenes of The Waltons, more Ask Judy. If you enjoy these, please do hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.